Hey, this is Ben Solomon, and welcome to this episode of the Techno Leadership Show. In this episode, we are going to be discussing how to analyze your strengths and leverage them in your career and your life. So, if you've watched the previous episode, I talked about various things you can do to do a personal SWOT analysis to figure out your strengths, your weaknesses, and then based on the results that you get, you can do a bit more of an analysis on your strengths. Now, to analyze your strengths, what I personally would do, and I have done when working with team members and other colleagues that I've helped, is going about their results, sit with them obviously and do this. But if you want to do it on your own, what you can do is take a notebook or a large piece of paper, write down all of the strengths that come from each of the results. I'm just going to walk through a hypothetical scenario. I've just picked a couple of different answers, and I've also put a few things that you could potentially use as a model to look at and write down and find that common theme of your strengths. And as I've said previously, even though they're strengths, they have areas that might lead to blind spots and weaknesses as well. So you've got to be aware of that. So let's do that right now. I'll just run a model through so that you can model after it and do your own analysis for your strengths based on the results that you get. Going to the browser window. Cool, here we are. So in this you can see we've got Isfj as one of the personality types in the 16 personalities or MBTI. They're known as defenders, and their strengths are being supportive, being very reliable and patient, imaginative and observant, enthusiastic, loyal, hardworking, good practical skills. So they're very detail-oriented people. They have a tendency to have a lot of patience when dealing with customers, so they're fantastic at customer service, support services being more the interactive side of things. They also have a tendency to gravitate to professions like nursing, which is outside of obviously our technology and engineering space, but in the technology and engineering space they have a tendency to go towards more support related roles, and also some coaching leadership style roles where they are more supportive leaders. So it's a different style of leadership again. So understanding the fact that you're supportive, you're reliable and patient means you know that you are pretty good in pressure situations. You can be the front facing person. You're fairly imaginative and observant. So you observe things and solve problems based on the observations and using your imagination. So those are good things, but there are also downsides to them. So when you're overly supportive, as you can see in the weaknesses, there's that tendency to repress feelings. And that's not a bad thing directly if you look at it, but if you continue to do that and you don't have an outlet, let's say even outside of work, to let go of those feelings that you're feeling, there's a tendency to put stress on yourself, and which can lead to burnout. So you need to find some sort of a outlet for yourself to be able to maintain your well-being, maintain your sense of self and all of that. And taking things personally, it's a positive thing in the sense that you take ownership of situations, but in a situation where you're like on a support desk, being in a service oriented role, there are chances of being told things that aren't meant to be personally attacking, but you could take it personally and it does hurt. So in those sort of circumstances you need to find ways to mitigate these things and to mentally be able to resolve that and go, look, that was not meant personally. But also the other thing that you can do is, when you have good relationships with people, you can always go and talk to them and say, look, I didn't like the way you spoke to me when you came for having that issue fixed. I just felt like, it could have been dealt with a bit more differently. So having a little bit of that ability to openly communicate, which, when you're humble and shy, it can be difficult for you to confront someone and say, look, unfortunately, the way you talked to me when you came to have an issue fixed and when I was trying to help you was not, beneficial. But if you could next time be a bit more mindful that, I'm trying to do my best to support you and help you get the results that you want, that helps. So you just have to find mitigative strategies to help you with that when that's the case. So I've just chosen one. For every of the 16 personalities, there are positives and negatives, and you've got to find mitigative strategies when dealing with the weaknesses. And also, based on your strengths and weaknesses, you might want to look for roles that make use of more of your strengths and put you in a situation where you don't really have to be using stuff that are your weaknesses. So if you go into the MBTI thing, this is DISC. So let's say you've got high C with S as your second highest, which I've seen more regularly among technical stuff. Not saying other personalities don't exist, but I believe about 40+% of technical staff would potentially have a high C or a high C with S as a trailing. And again, you see the traits, things that motivate you are, need to be precise. So detail orientedness, patience, thoroughness, thoughtfulness, all these are part of your strengths. But in situations where you are called to make decisions on the fly, it might be difficult for you to make what you feel is the right decision. So for example, if you're in a management position and your executive management asking you to make a decision pronto, you might need to set expectations with them saying, look, I need to ensure that we have the right data to make that decision correctly. I need X amount of days so that I can analyze some of the data and give you a good decision that benefits us in the long term. So you've got to set it as an expectation that benefits them while still working with your strengths and weaknesses. So that's that. And if you're in an engineering position and your manager asks you to make a decision which you're not sure of, because as someone with a high C and S trailing, you want to have a lot of information to make a more accurate analytical decision, you have to set expectations with them and say, look, I understand your concerns. I'm doing everything I possibly can to give you an answer, but this might take a couple of days, whatever it might be. Set that expectation and work with them, help them understand that you're doing it for the benefit of the organization and for the benefit of that leader, so that when they give a report to upper management, they can give the right information up there. So in Enneagram, I've actually just picked up type 6. And again, here you can see the deepest fear in this case is, fear being unprepared and unable to defend themselves from danger. So danger, you might think, oh, it's, a subjective thing. But in a situation where you're being asked to make a decision without all the information, that is in some sense danger for you. And you're unprepared. So that's where you need to have a bit of courage to say, look, I understand this is what you want, but I need to make sure that I'm giving you the right answer, something that benefits you and benefits the organization. So please give me a bit of time so that I can get the right information for you. Always setting expectation, making sure that your manager, leader has full, transparent understanding of why you're taking that time, helps them also support you in that process. I used these tests with my team members because that way I knew how they function, and I tried my very best not to put them in situations where they were in the area of weaknesses as much as possible. It's not always possible, but when it's not possible, I was very open with them and said, look, I understand that this would make you uncomfortable, but this is the situation I'm in, being asked all these questions. So if you can try and help me with the answers based on your observations and your analysis as fast as possible, that'd be great. So yeah, again, understanding both sides. It's a two-way street. Your manager, your leader, they've got to understand you, and you've got to understand them to an extent, so that you can work with how they function and how you are expected to function. Big five, again, each one of them has positives and negatives. So if you're higher in openness, you tend to be more open to new things, and you might thrive in, let's say, a startup style environment. But if you're low in that, you might thrive a lot more in a slower bureaucratic environment where changes are very slow, they're hyper planned, and take time to go through. And so those are things you've got to look at. And again, each of these has their own positives and negatives. Then in talent dynamics, I've just chosen mechanic because, again, tends to be the kind of personality that goes into more technology professional role. Always have a tendency to tinker, to make sure we are finding better ways to do things, making the process better, making documentation better, making the systems better. All of that is part of the mechanics kind of bread and butter. So again, those are strengths if you look at it from that perspective. But if you're working in an organization where it's a startup and they need things to move fast, as a mechanic, people might feel like you're not living up to the pace at which you need to be working at. And that's where you need to probably work with your manager to make them understand that, look, you're the kind of person who ensures that things don't blow up. And so you might work on systems and improvements, whereas there are other engineers who are probably more adapted to wanting to change, and they might be on the front end of things, changing things on a regular basis, working in agile teams, etc., whereas you're more into the systematizing and ensuring that long-term profitability and working with these systems and things don't blow up is your responsibility. So yeah, work with your managers to help them understand and try and understand the environment that you'd be going into, and again, applying for roles based on what your strengths are. You can apply for roles in the type of company that supports your strengths and doesn't utilize too much of your weaknesses. This one again is from Colby, and this is my result, but I'll just use it as an open thing to show. I'm very high on quick start, which means I don't take too much time to make decisions. And I'm usually out there trying new things, experimenting, testing, trying. And if I've got a team that's full of ones or twos here, they might get frustrated with me. So I need to find a way to help them understand and also do things in such a way that it doesn't affect them. And then people who are low in implementer are more visual in their heads, having a bigger plan, whereas people who are 7, 8, 9s here would have to physically construct things. Let's say a physically constructed network with switches and all that, to see for themselves how everything works or should work. And then you have fact finders who are for myself, I'm high in the fact finder, but not as high as my quick start. So I lead with my quick start, and then I use fact finding to make sure that I have the right information to make the best possible decision with that quick start mentality that I have. But in this case, if I had like an 8 here and a 6 or a 7 here, I would do a lot more research before I took action, even though it's a fairly high quick start. That's how it's almost an exponential scale there. With follow through, it depends on what sort of systems. Like if you're low in follow through, you don't follow systems. You're the sort of person who's on your feet, thinking and doing things. Whereas someone up here, 8, 9, has to be exactly by the system. and they're fantastic at making sure everything's done according to governance frameworks and principles and security areas. Everything is covered for as people high in follow through and high in fact finding. So again, based on where you're at, you fit in different places. If you're high in quick start, a startup environment might be great for you. If you're low in quick start, again, you'd probably low in quick start, higher in follow through and higher in fact finding. You'd work well in a more bureaucratic, slower environment. Strengthfinder, each of these has its positives and negatives again. Again, they're stacked as your top 5 usually are the most influencing, and then there's the other ones there. And let's say you have, let's say, analytical, being engineering or technical sort of role. You might have a high analytical thing, so which means again you have to take time to analyze, get all the data together so that you can make the right decision based on your analysis, and that's your strength. And you'd work best in organizations that need that kind of analytic role, and someone who you might work in, let's say, a solution architecture, higher engineering level 3 sort of roles. So yeah, again, look into those sort of aspects of. And then working genius, again, as I said, is something new that I've gotten into. And let's say, for example, if you have high tenacity, you're the kind of person who someone like me needs, because I'm very high up here and I have a tendency to start things and ponder and think, oh, what if we can get this done? But I need someone like you with high tenacity and high enablement to ensure that the projects get done and get done to timelines, get done to specs. So yeah, based on that, look at all your strengths, look at your high strengths, look at all the positives that they give you, and based on that, it'll help you make a decision on what kind of environment you should be working in, what kind of role you should be aiming for. At the end of the day, it's looking for a place where you can do the best work and be fulfilled and enjoy doing that work and making a difference in your life. Hopefully that's given you some ideas on how to analyze your strengths. I'll do a future video on how to analyze your weaknesses and what mitigations you can do and how to mitigate them based on a scenario like this. And then I might then work on future videos where I go through each of these psychometric platforms and see if I can give you as much information as possible within shortish videos of 15 to 20 minutes, so that you get enough of an idea to be able to do it on your own. So hopefully that's helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos. And if you like this and if you'd like to hear more about stuff like this, please do subscribe to the channel and do leave me a comment with any questions that you may have, or anything else that you'd like covered in future videos. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.